Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Budd. Like the wonderful handoff we just had, I'm here with Elizabeth Adams and Alton Glass, and we're going to talk to you very briefly about combating implicit bias through technology and impact storytelling. So POV is going to be the piece that we're highlighting specifically, which Alton has done an amazing job in creating, and Elizabeth has been right by his side the entire time. So within our deck here, you're going to see the story. So POV is going to be setting place in 2025. It's about a young, gifted Black coder. His name is Cassius. And instead of going the traditional route and having a parole officer, we kind of take the journey with Phoenix, which is an AI drone. And the story kind of unfolds and how this can be a great piece of information, or this could be something that is completely different. But I love how Alton kind of story told this into creating a conversation piece in my complete eyes. I think there are lessons that are to be learned on either side of this. And it really opens up the conversation on how we can continue to grow technology, but also consider the people that it's going to affect the most. And specifically in this space is going to be Black and brown people. So the subject and the genre is going to be sci-fi. It is a virtual reality piece. I would love for everyone to experience it within headset, but I know due to COVID, it's going to be a little bit harder for everybody to experience that way. But we've worked with Alton to create many different iterations of this piece so that everyone can feel accessible in viewing this. So about Grx Immersive Labs, this is something that is the birth child of Alton Glass. He's worked very, very hard on creating this and additional pieces, including In Protest, which you can also view. And I think that it is more than important that we continue to have this conversation, and not just only in Games for Change, but also outside of this in our communities. And how can we create a welcoming space, but also having the tough conversations that GRX uses time in and time again to kind of explore through his creative storytelling. So here is just a really quick contact information. So if you want any additional information specifically about GRX or POV, this is going to be the email that you'll be able to use to contact either one. We'll also, when we wrap this up, tell you where to find each of us individually. But I'm going to show you guys a very quick trailer to POV before we open up the discussion with the three of us.
As a condition of your release, you're going to be assigned to the drone surveillance program.
You will only be placed on level 1. If you stay on track, these conditions will be lifted within 6 months for good behavior.
Yeah, but how do all of these conditions make me free?
A bill was passed recently. It was designed to reduce mass incarceration and high incidence of police brutality. Are you familiar with drone technology and artificial intelligence?
Yes, ma'am, I'm very familiar.
You're welcome to opt out. Serve the remainder of your sentence.
Be mindful of what you do and what you say, because they are learning by watching and observing us. Everything we do is a reflection of how this technology will be. So if you want these robots to have your back, then you better start teaching them how.
Sure. When we're out in the field, when we encounter suspects, I'm immediately viewed as an enemy, when all I'm trying to do is my job.
They will be monitoring and processing all.
You will only be placed on level 1.
Stop following me everywhere I am.
One, are you hit?
It's really an extension of us. It's our reflection.
Thank you guys for showing that and putting it up on a much larger screen. So before we jump into the conversation too deeply, I wanted to talk to you, Alton, and just tell us a little bit of your background and what made you want to create a piece like POV, and then I'm going to pass it over to Elizabeth to ask a very similar question.
Oh, my background is, thank you, Aaron. My background is in traditional filmmaking. I was making feature films for over 15 years as a director and producer and writer. And then about 6 years ago, I had an opportunity to get my hands on a VR experience. And it really, really just, blew my mind in terms of what I could do with the imagination and things we could create with and how we can evolve storytelling in certain ways. And then on the journey, getting the opportunity to work on POV really showed me how we could create impactful stories and how could we use immersive technology, immersive storytelling to really push certain messages along and really, really create awareness about certain topics through an engaging immersive experience.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for having me today. This is an exciting time to be talking about a topic such as this. I've been a technologist for over 20 years, but I've been spending the last 4 years specifically around AI ethics and the last 2 years working with policymakers here in Minneapolis around tech transparency and more specifically around facial recognition, body cam, video surveillance. And so this project fits right in the wheelhouse with the policymakers that I've been talking about. And so it's really, like I said, an exciting time. It's important that those who are not only technology developers, but also policymakers and communities understand the importance of what happens when these technologies make their way into our communities. And they could be harmful or they could be helpful. So it's great to be able to have this conversation.
Absolutely. I think you called out a big point. It could be helpful or it could be harmful for whatever the group is. And I found that within the piece, it kind of teetered and, your mind went one way, but the result was something completely different without giving so much away. And I wanted to know, I know, Alton, you created this piece a couple years ago, but seeing how technology has changed from whenever you started the project to where it is now, do you feel like we're going in a more positive direction, or do you think that our voices are being heard in these spaces? And, Elizabeth, do you think that in policymaking that's also being reflected?
Ooh, that's a good question. At the time, being focused, solely on storytelling, that's one of the reasons why I was really interested in collaborating with Elizabeth, because she was at the forefront of understanding what's happening behind, closed doors with the technology developers as well as policymakers. So it's been a journey for me understanding how we take our project that was initially just designed, just to bring awareness to now understand how you can create true impact and dialogue. So for me, I've been able to meet a lot more individuals in this space to see that there is a lot of work that is being done on moving the needle in these areas that could potentially impact individuals, or as she mentioned, provide opportunities for individuals in these communities. So I would say yes, it's moving in a positive direction, and if we can continue to create more experiences that bring people together and that knowledge and that information, I think it'll continue to grow.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that my work around tech inclusion has definitely spun up. So companies as well as policymakers are really, really interested in involving communities upfront in the design and the development process. So what we don't have is what's happened in Minneapolis, which is once the technology has made its way, such as facial recognition, into communities are now uniting to ban it. So we really don't want to do that. We really want inclusive technology. And here we've been advocating for public oversight of surveillance technology, again, so that communities aren't facing these trade-offs of not being able to enjoy time with their families and instead uniting to ban against a certain technology. So I feel encouraged that I feel like policymakers are beginning to listen. I know that the FTC has come out with strong guidance for technology development companies around algorithmic bias and what that means and how they would get involved if we don't have an inclusive collaboration up front.
Absolutely. And I think that you guys both hinted on, without actually saying it, is like, throughout the pandemic, technology wasn't as easily accessible to a lot of people of color in certain communities. And I think that with everyone being forced to work from home or, distance learn, having those pieces of technology being handed off to these communities that are usually underserved, it introduced them to a whole nother world. And I think within the VR piece and the VR world, that's another world that we can really open their eyes in and continue to educate. I know my niece and my nephew, I think they can work my iPhone better than I can, but how can we really force and like you said, Alton, push the needle to make sure that they're thinking as a holistic view and not just, I use this piece of technology for some entertainment or to watch a certain program, but how they know the back end of stuff, how these things are created, and whose implicit biases are automatically going to be put into certain pieces of technology that are being created that we're kind of being left out of the table or don't necessarily know that table exists just yet. So question for you, Alton, is, in creating POV, like what do you want to see as a next step action, not just for you as in like what's your next piece going to be created, but what do you want people to take away from the piece in itself?
Well, I want people to be able to reimagine, what public safety could look like, especially if they're involved in the implementation of these technologies and these solutions. And, for POV, we didn't want to create a fear-based narrative that, oh, technology is going to be the terminator of our communities or terminators of our humanity. It's more about how do we use our skill sets and imagination to come up with these solutions that could be hyper-local problem solving in your community or at a larger, state or united level to be able to have some impact. So at the very, very what's the most important thing for me now is being able to show that there are opportunities in this space versus just having fear of the technology. And like you said, bringing in that emerging technology literacy to say, okay, I've heard of these things, but now I know what they are. And through immersive experiences, I've now experienced what this could look and feel like. So now how can I participate in either going down one track of the policy and the civic engagement, or, perhaps I might want to learn how to create and develop technologies myself. And that allows us to now come together as a melting pot and bring our own unique point of view to these emerging technologies. And I think that's what's most important. We just didn't want to leave the piece where we were saying, think this way. It's open-ended, so you can have your own point of view and understand how we can have an impact with these emerging technologies. So for us now, my goal is to continue to expand it. We have a curriculum now for it, where once you go through the experience, you can actually go down a pathway of understanding more deeply what these emerging technologies are, how you can get involved, and also adding some interactivity to the experience. People can make choices in the experience and have some agency. So we just want to expand on the world and make people, help people become a part of not just the narrative, but changing the narrative out in reality as well.
Amazing. Elizabeth, for you, I have a question. Like, for someone that doesn't know much about implicit bias or someone that's just now learning about this, like what could they do as a more boots on the ground outside of, having lofty ideas? What's an immediate action that you think that they could take to kind of circumvent some of these implicit biases? Or if they wanted to learn more, where would they, best go as a resource?
So one of the things first off, thank you for the question. One of the things I always tell people is to follow their curiosity. If you like fishing, follow fishing technology and see how there might be some challenges in that space. If you're thinking about housing, if you're thinking about education, follow your curiosity because you will most likely be energized by that particular discipline once you get started. And for me, here in the city of Minneapolis, what I would like to see is I would like to see technology be at the forefront as an influencer in the discussions when we're talking about housing, when we're talking about vaccine distribution. And when we're talking about jobs and we're talking about healthcare, I would like to see technology be at the forefront of those particular discussions. And we have lots of experts here. So for people, they can get involved in community organizations, community committees. There's lots of different ways that people can get involved, but first follow your curiosity into the path that would energize you.
I think that's an amazing call out to follow your passion or follow your gut, because I think you'll be a little bit more tied to the overall goal of it if it's something that you're naturally interested in. Like there's implicit bias listed in almost everything that is already created. And how could you make that a little bit more personal? Like whether it be, like you said, with housing, it could be in the medical industry, it could be in so many different facets. It's just a matter of kind of making it shapeshift and fit what your genuine passion is and how you could lead the charge. I think that's a really, really good call out on that regard. And, Alton, I know you created this piece and you've seen it through top and bottom. I know there's been different versions. And like you said, there's a more of a curriculum built around that. Do you foresee this as something that you would screen with, universities, K through 12? Is this something that you want to, take on the road and show different communities about? Like what's your big goal for POV, outside of Games for Change?
I like to make it a traveling immersive exhibition, going into museums, going into partner organizations, going into malls, meeting young people where they are, whether we're next door to a sneaker shop, and you can learn about this technology and how this technology, also impacts your buying decisions and impacts your career decisions. Like there's so much to get under the hood around AI and emerging tech that this immersive experience, I think, can lead you down a pathway to. So for me, it's about the information. And like you said, making sure that you can create an experience that ties closely to something that you might be really, really passionate about. I think that's where we'll start to see what you all mentioned about people taking part in it and feeling like they're bringing a part of themselves to helping create impact. So HBCUs is going to be another one. We've had great success doing our previous immersive media workshops for HBCUs, and now we're using this as an introduction into immersive and emerging technology, where you get an opportunity to experience POV. So we want to continue to tour the universities and organizations who are developing technologies as well, and policymakers, so they can get an understanding of what's happening and see how fast. Like when we made it, the project, it seemed like it was sci-fi, but now 2-3 years later, all this is happening. So it's amazing to see how fast it's progressed to the point where this project is seemingly not as futuristic as we thought it was. 2025 is right around the corner, and these technologies are moving very fast. So we want to get into the community as soon as possible and spark these conversations. And hopefully we can spark civic engagement along with that, so they can partake in the futuristic narrative of what can impact themselves in their community.
I love when you said meeting people where they are. I think a lot of times with technology, we just assume everyone has equal access to it. Everyone is able to get from point A to point B, and that's just not necessarily true. And, Elizabeth, I would love to hear your thoughts. I know we're kind of running out of time here, but do you think that this would also be a piece that should be viewed by policymakers and, law enforcement and things like that, just to kind of open up their perspective a little bit and meeting them where they are so that they can understand a story that like Alton created?
Yes, and with the short time that we have, I'll say yes, yes, yes. And I'll also say that representation matters. So being able to see creatives who look like us at the forefront, helping policymakers understand the impacts to communities of color or those that have been historically excluded is going to be critical. And it's also going to help the next generation too, to be able to see creatives and people in the immersive experience as well. So yes, yes, yes.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you, Alton. I know our time is almost up, but we will be hopping over to the Q&A session. So if you guys have an opportunity to continue the conversation with us, we would love to chat with you all over there. Alton and Elizabeth, just let them know where they can find you if they cannot make that session.
Oh, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, Elizabeth M. Adams.
Yeah, same, Alton Glass on LinkedIn. And you can also email us at POV@grximmersive.com, POV@grximmersive.com.
Perfect. You guys can find me on all socials. It's Aaron J. Budd, including LinkedIn. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.